done a lot of rescue work for people who've had earthbound spirits and wayward souls that needed help passing on to the light. And she's going to be talking to you about that and much, much more today. So please welcome Glennys Mackay.
Good afternoon. I just want to thank you for inviting me along. And it's nice to know that there is a great interest out there because, you know, there's such a lot of fear about death. To me, death is just another state of consciousness. I've had several deaths myself. I think the first one when I was about 18 months old when I drowned. Don't remember much about that. And then when I was about 15 years of age, I was deliberately drowned at a beach in Hobart. It was a regatta was on down Sandy Bay. And apparently it appears there was this young lad who wasn't quite right. He was going around holding people under the water. And I got out of my depth. The next thing, these hands came around my throat and I was being held under. And at first I thought it was my brother-in-law having a joke, you know, and I was trying to get up and I couldn't get up. And then I had this experience where you could feel your lungs filling up. And I knew that I was going to die, and next thing there was an almighty explosion. It was like an explosion in my head. And next thing everything went very calm, and then I was drifting. And I was drifting towards the light. And as I drifted towards the light, I could see someone in the distance. So I was curious to go forward to find out who it was. And then I heard a voice say, "Go back. You're not ready to come here. Go back." I came to on the beach. There were police, there was an ambulance and that there. But apparently he'd tried it on some other people and they'd called the police. And so I was very lucky that I came back. They decided they didn't need me over there. So that brought me to total awareness, but from when I was a child, because I came from Tasmania, and yes, they did take the other head off. They always say Tasmania got two heads, but that's probably why they're so smart. But anyway, from when I was a little girl, from when I was a child on their parents' farm, they used to give me sick animals and I used to carry them around to heal them. And so, but I used to see the people and see things, not realising that nobody else could see them. And I used to have friends that would come and play with me. And because my father was from a large family, one of my aunts, because they all had farms and they had businesses, and so what happened was, on a Sunday afternoon, the family would all congregate at one of my aunt's place. In those days, you'd have about 20 people around the table. And I used to see people there, and I'd see other relatives. And over a period of 4 months, I'd tell them that Uncle so-and-so or Auntie so-and-so was just giving me a message. And one of the last ones was my Auntie Isabel, and her Uncle George was standing behind her and said that she was going to join him at 2:45 that afternoon. And being I was about 7 or 8, and I told her, I told her who was there, and you're going to join him this afternoon. And I always remember there was a hand came out and slapped me on the face. And anyway, what happened was she went outside and went down the steps to go out to the toilet, and she had a heart attack and died. So after that, my Auntie Mary used to say to my father, Les, if you come up to the farm next weekend, leave that peculiar kid at home because she's a jinx. Every time she comes here, somebody dies. So I got myself into a lot of trouble, even when I went to school, because I'd see kids having accidents and I'd tell them. And they'd say, Glennys made me do it, so I'd get into trouble. So over a period of years, I learned to keep my mouth shut. But it was a hard burden. But yes, so I did have those gifts, and but you see, I thought everybody else had that. I thought everyone else could see them. But apparently I was a bit peculiar, so I was offended. But you know, when the next time I had a death experience was when I was at the age of 29. I had my first angina attack, and I went out of my body. And then I had a couple of other cases, but I suffered quite a bit from, I had cancer, and that was another issue, but I managed to get over it. I think you go through a case when you're diagnosed, because I had the larynx and lungs and they say you don't get over that. And I was supposed to go into hospital to start radium treatment way back then. And I had a dream, and someone came to me, spirit came to me in the dream and told me if I went in I'd never come out, and they were going to guide me to a healer. And that morning I woke up and I said mentally to myself, I'm not going to die. And that was a major step, because I got rid of that fear and relying on drugs and doctors. And so I proceeded to be guided to a gentleman, and when I drove up to there, it was out in the country, and I drove up his driveway, the spiritual gentleman came to the door and said, come on in, I've been expecting you. So I went, yeah, so that was a bit of a surprise. But anyway, as a consequence, he put me on high doses of vitamins and minerals and whatever, and I had my voice back within 6 days, and within the month, it might have been 5, 6 weeks, I went back to the doctors and there was no sign of cancer whatsoever. So, but you know, also too, the power of the mind is the greatest tool you can have too. You can convince yourself that you're going to die, and you can convince yourself that you've got this, that and the other. But you have all the power to heal yourself. And that's very important, because, you know, it's amazing how the mind will play tricks on you. So that's something I've learned to get over cancer and arthritis and all the other strange things that have happened. But I went on ahead. I always wanted to be a doctor, and because I had rheumatic fever when I was younger, I got rheumatic fever, so I couldn't go ahead and study medicine. But I also then decided to study alternative medicine. So I finished up for 30 years. I was an osteopath, a herbalist, anything to do with healing, hypnosis, Bowen, anything to do with healing, I would study and train at it, because I don't believe you can put a shingle out and say you're a healer unless you've got some qualifications behind you. So I was able to use my spiritual gifts, and I had spirit people who would come through me and help them. One of the amazing things too that I'll just share with you, I had a gentleman come to see me. He was a young footballer, and I suppose he was about 6'3" and was nearly as broad. And he looked down at me and he said, I don't know why the doctor sent me to you, because I can't see how you're going to help me. So in the course of conversation, I found out that he was on workers' compensation, and his L4 and 5 is backwards out. So I started to treat him, and of course he was very tense, and he didn't really want me fixed. But anyway, I heard a voice say to me when I had him laying on the table, lift your hands up. And I lifted my hands up, and I turned, and there's a gentleman standing at the end of the therapy table, and he was dressed in a 3-piece suit. It was a dark pinstripe suit, and he had a white shirt with the, attachable collar with the little pearl buttons, and he had a fob watch, and he was very neatly dressed, and he was he had a very small moustache, and he said to me, move your hands up, and when I did, this young chap's lower lumbar clicked back into place. And I mentally said to him, well, who are you? And he said, William J.B. Forbes, doctor. And he disappeared. So over a period of time, he would come and help. And then we found out that I asked what the J.B. was for, and he said his name was William James Bennett Forbes. And he was a Harley Street specialist, and he passed away on the 13th of April in 1914. And he said if only he'd known about spirit, he felt he could have helped a lot more people. So he chose to come, one of the people to come through me to help in my work. But I also did some investigations. I spent time with a very elderly doctor that had retired, and he researched and found that this man definitely did exist. And he did pass away on the date that he told me, and he was a Harley Street specialist. So, but the thing is with being a medium and clairvoyant and making communication, I like to keep my feet firmly on the ground. You're not going to get anywhere if you become a space cadet. You've got to be grounded, and you question everything. Because I am a bit of a skeptic as well, and healthy skepticism is a good thing. You question. And that's what I've always done most of my life. this question, what I get when people come through, Spirit comes through and gives me something, I want facts, you know. So I've been very, very lucky and very gifted. I've been very thankful that I've had that gift to be able to help, because you can help people a lot more when you are able to be the instrument for that healing from Spirit. Now you see, there's no such thing as death. Death is only another state of consciousness. When we pass through that veil, we take our thoughts and feelings with us. And that's something that I've experienced. I had, some years ago, I had another heart attack, and it was just after midnight, and I went out of my body, and you go into, there's nothing that here on this earth can describe the beauty and the colours and the peace. And it's all knowing. It's like you know everything. It's like the past, the present, the future, everything. You have a greater understanding of life. And I went out, and then I thought, I wonder if my husband, George, knows I've just had a heart attack. Next thing, I was back in the room, even though the room was in total darkness. I watched him as he stumbled out of bed, and he's saying, where are your pills, where are your pills? And he was staggering, he staggered and bounced off the built-in wardrobe. And I started to laugh to myself. I thought, I better go back and tell him where they are. Well, the next thing I know, I'm in intensive care at the hospital. And it was quite interesting, because all of a sudden I felt as though my life force had come back into my body, and it felt like my legs and arms went up in the air when it came back. And I was taken to St Andrew's Hospital, and that was in 91 I think it was. Anyway, the doctor said that I'd had a heart attack and whatever. And I said, oh, well, that's good. I said, now I can go home. He said, no, you can't go home. You've got to stay here. And I said, I know what caused it. I'm going home. So I had an argument with him, and I signed myself out of hospital and went home. So, and of course, years later, I had another heart attack, and that was 7 years ago, and I finished up in PA, and I finished up having a triple bypass and valve repair. But they said to me then, the doctor said, if you hadn't signed yourself out of St Andrews, he said you would have only had a stint. So, but they took me back that night into the theatre, because I was hemorrhaging internally. So they took me back and opened me up, and that's when I went out of my body. I went into the spirit world again. But I was floating around, and I was listening to the doctors talking, and I listened to this tall gentleman saying to them, how could you let this happen to this woman? Get her back to theatre straight away. So that's what happened. But I went into the spirit world again. But it seemed like there were hundreds of people, spirits here with their arms crossed, and they wouldn't let me through. So I had to come back, and then when I did come back, I could hear someone. It was like coming down a tunnel. I could hear an echo, and I could hear someone saying, we've got to get the lungs working. So, yeah, so here I am. So, you know, these experiences give you a greater understanding about life and love. And you know, sometimes I think it's very sad when you see families not getting along. You know, we all need to build bridges, because life is so short. And you know, we do live in a materialistic world, and that's the sad part about it. People become very selfish and materialistic, and they don't know about unconditional love. And I think that's one of the most important things we have to learn about in life. So as far as that goes, we're here to do our best to try and help one another. Also, too, I just wanted to read a little something. I'm also, as Cheryl said, I'm a spiritualist minister. I started doing it many years ago, and I run a church service the second and fourth Sunday of every month over at Lillian Avenue, Salisbury. And I often get called out to do rescue work where people have lost souls, or people call them ghosts. But as far as I'm concerned, 9 times out of 10 are loved ones or family that are held there because of our own grief, and they want to be around us. And so that's what I do. I go in and try and get rid of the spirits and let them know that they don't belong there anymore. They need to go into the light. And some of them aren't so nice. what you also have to understand that there's ley lines that run through this earth, and you get streams, underground streams that crisscross. Sometimes they can be very negative, and often that is what attracts these entities, because they feel that they need to be there. But the other thing is too, I've been to homes where I've been asked to come in because there's been spirits activity, and I have found that people have passed away. One of the family members had passed away either with cancer or some related illness. But what I've found is they have slept, their bed's been on that negative ley line for 30, 40 years. And I always say, and even children, if you have children that can't sleep or you have trouble with sleeping, you need to look at where your bed is and look at the room if you can change and get off those negative ley lines, because they go through. And the same with these high tension wires, power wires that we have around these transformers. They're so dangerous to your health, and so is your microwaves and your mobile phones. I like new ones. But so what I do, I find out who they are when I go in. In fact, I had one a few days ago. I had to go over to Chermside to do one, and that was really bad. There were so many ley lines going through that place, but also there was a quarry over the back of the place. I picked up 2 children, and the little girl, and she told me her name was Emily, and the little boy was Troy. He was 8, and they both died in accidents. And the little girl passed away. She was in a fire. There was also another gentleman there, and there were 2 there, and this other very tall gentleman had a fight with the other one and killed him with the back end of a shovel. So he was still trapped there, so I had to move them off into the light. So this is what happens sometimes when you get, when there's negative energy. I've had friends, and we've gone up even the Ipswich Highway, where there's an area there where there's always accidents. And I helped work with Sharon on the Sharon Phillips case and the Janet Phillips cases, and went up where those girls, and there was another young girl that was abducted years ago. And there's bad energy that goes through that. So we used to go up and try and neutralise that energy from those ley lines, because that's where you get constant accidents and that. So that was one of the things that I've been doing over the years, is trying to clear energy. I worked for a long time since 1989 in America. I spent 12 years working in Hawaii. I did a lot of work out at the University of Hawaii, and I used to have my own radio shows there. I used to be wined and dined by the head of the Defence Department. I hope they took an interest in my work. But I used to go out and do rescue there and help with the police and that. But the University of Hawaii have got absolute evidence that life does continue after death. I was called there to release a young soul. There was complaints that in one of the units there where the young students stay, there was a lot of activity. And what happened was, some years earlier, this young chap had committed suicide. And I did a lot of work with Dr. Glenn Grant. He was a historian and criminologist. And he used to have these ghost tours of Honolulu. And I met him through a friend, so he used to take me out to clear areas. But anyway, what happened was, a young couple came to one of his meetings and said that he'd lost his cousin, he'd committed suicide, and at the university where he was living, at the student accommodation, and that there'd been a lot of activity. And this other young chap said, well, look, I'm in this room, and he said, it's really strange. He said, I had this dream. He said, I dreamt that this young lad came out of the cupboard, he walked over to the desk, he got the chair and he brought it over and turned it round and leaned on the back of it and proceeded to tell me that he died because he was so stressed that his girlfriend, they broke up, and he was so upset about it. But he said, what really shook me up, he said, when I woke up in the morning, the chair that I'd already put under the desk the night before, when I went to bed, was leaning up against the bed. So Glenn asked me would I be kind enough to go up and see what I can do. So first of all, they took me to the wrong floor, and then I said, well, I need to go down to the next one down below. And I walked into the male bathroom and that, and one of the lecturers said, "Why is she going in there?" It was because I felt this energy from this young lad was in there. Anyway, I walked along and I came to the exact room where he died, because he actually hung himself from the wardrobe. And what happened was, as I got to the door, all of a sudden he took me over and he came through me with this Hawaiian voice. And he said, "Jesus Christ, what have I done? What have I done? Jesus Christ, what have I done?" Because he was out of his body and realised he just killed himself and hung himself. Anyway, he came through and he gave names of family members, his best mate, and told them a few. Well, they got it on tape. And of course, what happens sometimes, when that energy withdraws, I often collapse. I fall over or collapse. And in his book, in the book they wrote, called Obaki, which means ghosts, that he said, Dr. Grant said, "Holy hell, I think we've killed the medium." Because I collapsed on the ground and I thought they'd killed me. But anyway, it was great that these academics are finally on tape, and then they went and researched, went and saw the family. His best mate was his cousin, and he gave the name of the girl, which was accurate, and he gave the name of the family and the information. So it was all confirmed, and so they have that at the University in Hawaii, that life does exist and you can communicate. So that was one up for us spiritualists. But you know, I think too, when you release your fear, there's nothing to be afraid of, because fear is only created through ignorance. And because we've all probably been brought up in a religious, had to go to church or mass or whatever, and you're always told that when you've misbehaved it was the work of the devil. Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, if you reverse that word, it means lived, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to live. And the only devil is what is a negative thought. That's what evil is the negativity that you create within yourself. So if you can get rid of all the negative thoughts and depression and that, and start working on love and feel good about yourself. And I always say to people, go out and walk in the sun, go and ground yourself on the grass, go and work with Mother Nature, because that helps you. Am I boring you? Does anyone want to ask any questions? Good. Okay. One of the beautiful things that I run meditation. I have been running meditation since 1980, and I used to run a closed circle for communication, and I still run classes. But for many years I used to block and I wouldn't let anyone come through me, because I used to think these people think that it's coming from my mental mind, and you know, you've got to have proof about all this. So what they used to do, they virtually put me to sleep, life as I thought, and then Spirit would come through and talk. So I've been very fortunate. We've had Harry Edwards, who's a wonderful healer, a British healer. He comes through and gives us talks and lectures on healing. We've had quite a few different people come through. Also, loved ones often come through. We've had people come to our group, and loved ones that have come through and give them accurate information. The other one more recently was Grace Cook, and she said it's the first time that she's ever channeled through anyone, and she brought through, she used to channel White Eagle, everybody. And but what she said was the most important thing in her life is to get out in the sun, to accept the rays or the spheres of light from the sun's rays, walk on Mother Earth, get yourself grounded, and that helps to build your soul. And that's what we're here. We're a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. And that soul, we're here to learn, to grow. And that's what she said. It doesn't matter. Life is a stepping stone. It doesn't matter what you do. You fall down the cracks, you've got to get up and move on. And we always have to learn to take responsibility for our own lives. We can't blame others because something goes wrong, because we choose to be in that situation. and we choose to have that experience. But if you didn't have all those experiences, how are you going to build your character? How are you going to learn to be a better person? How are you going to be able to learn to love who you are so you can learn to love others unconditionally? And that's what it's all about. We have the power to heal ourselves. We can be that channel because life is made up of energy and we are part of that energy. The whole world is energy. So we can tap into that energy to help heal ourselves. And everybody that comes into this world has psychic abilities. If it was bad, why would God give us that gift? Why would we be born with that? Why do we come back? And I've been told many times that we choose our parents, they don't choose us. We come back into this world to learn to grow, and maybe the parents have got something to learn from us as well. So, this is, I've had a few people poo-hoo then and said that's rubbish. But no, you look at a family, how many of you have got brothers and sisters and you're all so entirely different? I was the middle one of 7 children. There were 3 older and 3 younger. And I always used to feel I was the odd one out. And that peculiar kid leaver at home. Because I used to see things and tell people things. But, there's so much beauty out there in the world, and if you can just go out and share it and work on it. Does anyone want to ask me any questions?
Ley lines, how can you detect them?
Well, I have an aura meter, and you can do them with, you can learn to dowsing. For dowsing. I used to do dowsing years ago. You can use a willow bottle, or you can use, I bought an aura meter when I was over in America. I got it from the university, and it's very sensitive. Unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me today. I could have given you a demonstration. And that you can go along and pick up where your water is, or power wire, or power under the or streams. I sometimes used to use it for when we'd go out west. I'd say we go and look for gold, and I'd pick up all these. I'd go to a friend who was up at Sapphire, so I took it up there and let him use it for a little while. He picked up some really good sapphires. But the whole world, there's streams under everywhere. Right? And you get negative ones and you get positive ones. It's the same if you understand about our Indigenous people. They are very, very psychic. They are so telepathic. But we are also telepathic. We can, how often does someone, the phone rings and instantly you know who's on the line, right? Because we have that gift. I used to teach when I was in Hawaii, I used to teach telepathy. Because that's the future. That's the future, telepathy. The other thing too you'll find, because I've spent quite a bit of time with our Indigenous people, and also the Kahunas in Hawaii and the Maoris in New Zealand, because I lived over there for 20 years. My husband was an All Black, and back in the late 50s, and sadly he passed away on the 1st of November last year. But they're very, very sensitive, and they know because they work with spirit. Some of the things that I learned from the Aborigines, our Indigenous people, what they find is they know where they build their Bora rings. They know where the vortexes are. So you'll always find one on a positive, and then you'll find one further away on a negative. But with the telepathy, they can virtually, if someone in Northern Territory, they're in Alice Springs, and someone down in Perth passed away, they instantly know. They instantly know that their friend has passed away. They're very telepathic. Now, where do you think that word bush telegraph came from? Any idea? Bush telegraph was that when the early settlers came here, they had no telephones or anything, and they were way out west in a station, and say, for instance, we'll name Mrs. Brown's ready to have a baby, and the doctor's probably several hundred miles away or wherever. They'd say to Billy or Tommy, whatever his name, Missy's having a baby, we need to get the doctor. So he'd send his message to the next group of Aborigines, and eventually they'd run in and say, Doctor, whatever his name is, Missy Brown's having a baby. So he'd get in his old truck and off he'd go to help deliver the baby. So that's what I'm saying, they are very, very telepathic. And that's where your word bush telegraph came from. So that's another little bit of news. But this is what you find, I spend a lot of time out there. There's vortexes and energy all over the earth. I spent last year over at Wilpena Pound in South Australia. I went to an elders conference, and they came from Alaska and Hawaii, American Indians and the Aborigines. Spent time out there with them, and I was very privileged to be taken to areas where there's very high energy, and some of their all their paintings and things were. But there are vortexes there. And, you know, someone can walk through it and you don't see them, they sort of disappear and then they reappear again later. When I was living in New Zealand, you know, our house was built on I didn't know it was on a earthquake, a fault line. And you'd wake up during the night and the house would be shaking and you think, oh, another earthquake, you roll over and go back to sleep. But the other interesting thing, I always knew when there was an earthquake coming, because often they come mainly during the change of seasons. And I would know by the animals, because we lived in a small town of about 22,000 people. And we had a farm behind us, sheep and cattle. And as soon as the birds would disappear, there wouldn't be a bird in place, and the animals would just run around, they'd go right down the far corner and they'd all gather. And you'd know instantly there's either a bad cyclone coming or an earthquake. 9 times out of 10 it's an earthquake, because they have the sensitivity to pick that up many hours before we even know that there's going to be one. So that's something that I find out. Now, I have got some slides here that I'd like to show you. Yeah. I was given this photo at a lecture I was doing in Dallas, and the lady came up to me and she said, "You may like this." She said, "That is my niece." This photo, she said, "What happened? She was killed in an accident. She was 16, and her parents were going to the cemetery to visit the grave, and here it is, it's winter and there's snow on the ground, and there's this rose bush in flower. So they took a photo, and when it was developed, her face is in the centre of the flower. You see? This was another place down in Logan I went to. The librarian had a woman went in and said that she just moved into this housing commission place, and there was a lot of problems there. So I was asked to go along, and one of the journalists, it was Joan Starr at the time, who sadly since passed away, and Nicole Lugg, she was at the time a camera, did the photography for the Logan newspaper. So they came with me, and when I went in to talk to the young lady that was in the house, she'd moved in a few weeks earlier with her 3 children, and it was just a housing commission where you open the door, front door, and it comes into the lounge, and then there was a small narrow hallway down to the bedrooms and the bathroom. And she said that when she first moved in there, she said she'd hear footsteps, and next thing she'd hear the front door open and slam, and then she'd hear footsteps down the hallway. And then she'd wake up at night hearing a little girl calling, "Mummy, Mummy, help me, help me." And they had a kitten, so they put it with a kitty litter in the bathroom so they wouldn't run away. And she heard the racket in the bathroom, so she got up, checked the bathroom, and the cat came rushing out. She went, and the children were all sound asleep, so she got the kitten, put it back in the bathroom. The following night, the same thing happened. She let the kitten out, and the kitten disappeared, never to be seen again. So she was very worried about what was going on there, and so I was asked to go down and check it out. What I did, I always take my aura meter and I check the ley lines and check all around it. And what I picked up was, I picked up this man running down the driveway, and I saw somebody lying down, and it looked to me like, I thought it was like a handle or something that he was holding out up. Anyway, what happened, I also went through the house, went into the bedrooms. It was about 9 o'clock at night, the children were asleep. When I went into the little girl's room, there's a young man standing by the window. So I said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm here to protect my nieces." I said, "What is your name?" And he said, "It's Jeffrey." So I said, "Well, what happened? You know, why are you here?" He said he'd been killed in a motorbike accident something like 14 months earlier, and he was there to protect his sister and his nieces. So I walked out, and as I walked down the hall, I felt, now there was no light on in the hall, and I said to Nicole, "Turn your camera this way and take a photo, because I feel that this young man or someone's walking behind me." And that's how it came out, and that's what you look like, spirit energy. And as it comes, and you'll see as he walked towards me, I had some more photos, but unfortunately I foolishly lent them to people. You never ever lend photos to journalists or people that write books for Women's Day or any of those, because you never get them back. But anyway, they're the ones that I was able to retrieve. And what I found out was, a few doors up, sometime earlier, a man had gone berserk with a gun. He killed his wife. He chased his wife down this driveway and shot her. He went back to his house and he killed his son and daughter. The little boy was trying to get out the window. The little girl was calling for a mother. And so their spirit energy was still attached to that area. We did research with the police and everything and found that it was factual. So we were able to send them into the light. There's a few areas around Woodridge and that where there's some really bad energy. And sometimes, you know, where these negative ley lines go, you'll often find there's disruption in the home, there's fights or arguments, people get very sick, and it's very sad. And you know, when property developers build these places, they don't go checking to see where the energy is, they just go on. We had one over on the north side just recently, near the railway line. There was a housing commission place, and that was actually built on a borer ring. And it's like a central railway station. The spirits are going in and out all the time, and the people are having no end of trouble. So we try and clear them, and then they come back again. So it's a bit of a worry. This was a friend of mine, a lady from Ipswich. She was over in Singapore and she had trouble with the back, so they told her to go and visit a acupuncturist. So she went in and he told her to lie on the table and while he went out to get the needles. And she said, I was lying there and I'm thinking, about AIDS. And then she said, I prayed and asked for a light of protection around myself. And just then her husband popped his head through the curtain and said, I'll take a photo. And that's how the two photos turned out. This is very interesting. This young girl was celebrating her 21st birthday. This over here is her mother. And some years earlier, her mother's sister passed away. When this photo was taken, her sister appeared in the photo. Oh, that's a very old one. How many people have seen this one? That was taken on the way up the old Bruce Highway. A family were travelling up, a lady with a nephew and his wife, and had been just after a storm, and there was a double rainbow. So they pulled over the side of the road, and the nephew got his camera out to take a photo, and that was developed by Kodak. Kodak wrote a letter saying that it had not been interfered with, and when she saw it, because several years earlier her son and husband had been killed near the Caloundra turnoff in a vehicle accident. So she assumed that could be Jesus or Mary and child, and she said that was a message to say that they were with spirit, with God. So that's a very old one. I've had that for many years. Now we talk about energy coming out of the earth. This is out of Bill Wheeler, where friends of mine were shifting an old house. And when they took a photo, now behind that house, on the bottom photo where that car's parked, right behind there, is the remains of a borer ring. They shifted this house and you can see this energy coming up out of the earth. This was taken several months later. Because my husband worked at Telstra, they'd work extra hours and they'd have every fortnight, they'd have the Friday off. So this particular early hours of Friday morning I couldn't sleep, and I'd organised, this was in January in 1996, I had organised all these international speakers to come for October for the conference. So I thought I'd get up and go on my computer and type emails and things to them. Anyway, I'm busy typing away and I could hear voices, And I thought, oh, George is talking in his sleep, so I got up, but no, he was sound asleep. And then I heard, I was starting to get daylight, and then I heard a rooster cry, and I thought, good God, someone's got a rooster. And I looked and I thought, 5 o'clock, and I thought to myself, goodness, I better get to bed. And I heard a voice say, yes, good night. Anyway, and I thought, oh, please don't let anyone ring before 10 o'clock so I can have a sleep. And anyway, I must have dozed off, and next thing I heard the phone ring and woke me up. My husband got out of bed and went to answer it. And I heard him say, no, she's not available. And you're ringing from where? From England? And I thought, oh my God, that's one of the speakers, I was. So I got out of bed, and as he came through past the dining room, he said, there's a lady on the phone. She says she's ringing from the UK. He said, sounds a bit strange. I better go and answer it. So when I went, we had our stove in the kitchen had a clock on it, and it said 6:10, so I'd only been in bed a short while. So I picked up the phone and I said hello, and she said, are you Glennys Mackay? And I said, yeah, I think I need to pinch myself. Yes, I'm Glennys Mackay. Well, I never. And I said, well, why are you ringing me? Well, first of all, she said, I have to tell you that Jesus did exist, and Jason saw his face on the rock, and she went on. So I said, who are you? And she said, Grace. And I said, Grace who? She said, Grace Hicks. And of course I'm a bit rude then. I said, well, what the hell are you ringing me for? Where are you? She said, I'm in Bude. And I said, well, where the hell is that? And she said, Cornwall, England. So I said, well, why are you ringing me? She said, well, Harry said there are several people we have to work with. So I said, where do we start? And he said, well, we'll work with Glennys Mackay. What part of England does she live in? I know she's on the northeast coast of Australia. And she said, God love a duck, that's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So she said, Harry said we'd ask Maury. We'll ask Maury, because he's bound to know different churches down there, and he may have a phone number. So he came back with 2 phone numbers, and he said, try the second one. And now I'm talking to you. And I said, Harry who? And she said, Harry Edwards. What? Well, I said, who's Maury? And she said, Maurice Babanel. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. So I said, what are you doing? I said, first of all, I said, what time is it? And she says, 8:25. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, we're having a seance. Having a seance. Okay. Well, Harry said to tell you the reason why the Glennys died, they got too much water. Well, I came back from America in October and decided I wanted some gladiolus for Christmas, so I planted all these, about 100 bulbs, and as they came up, we had a storm and hail and smashed them all down. And this was about, I think it was about the 18th of January I got the call. And then he said, oh, that was definitely a white shark. Well, we'd gone out with friends out of Bundaberg fishing, and I had a 40-pound strainer on this line, and we were cruising along, and I had the fishing line in the water, and I got a fish on it, and I couldn't hold it. And our friend John, he grabbed it, but the line broke, and he said, I reckon it was a shark. So Harry's saying from over there, in spirit, yeah, it was a shark. And then she brought my mother through, because when I was 4 years old, Dad bought me a Shetland pony and brought it home on the back seat of the car. It was so tiny, it was little. And Jerry didn't like my mother. And every time when I was a little girl, she'd go to put me on the back, he'd either stamp on a foot or bite her. And here she's saying, Jerry really didn't like me, did he? And so they'll bring all this information. Then she brought through Jenny, a lovely young woman that stayed with us. She was a school teacher. She had a very sad life, but when she was with me, she did try to she took an overdose, and eventually we helped her, but she went to Wellington, because we were living in New Zealand at the time. She went to Wellington, she got a transfer down there, and while she was there, she finally did the bad deed. She took an overdose and passed away. So here's Grace Hicks bringing Jenny through for me. So she brought all this information, then she said, oh, by the way, Murray said to tell you that they call you the White Lady and they're going to work with you more in the future. And I thought, couldn't believe it. So they went on and told me all these different things. So before she hung up, I said to her, what's your phone number? What is your address? So she gave it to me. And when I hung up, it was 7:10. So I don't know who paid the phone bill. Whether Spirit paid it, I don't know. But I was just blown away. I was wide awake by then. So I waited till about 8 o'clock and I rang Jeannie Kane down at the Boundary Street Church and I said, Jeannie, you're not going to believe this, but I had this phone call from a lady by the name of Grace Hexamus, and I said, and she brought through Morris Babanel and Harry Edwards. Well, this Grace Hicks apparently was quite a famous medium, and in the Psychic News in London, Morris Babanel was the editor and he used to write up stories about her. And Morris Babanel was the one that used to channel Silver Birch. And it was quite incredible. And I remember Jean, there was a long pause at the end of the phone and she said to me, you are so lucky, you don't realise how lucky you are. And I said, well, oh, that's right. He also said to me, go ahead with that conference because it's going to be quite successful. Well, it was, wasn't it? And I had wonderful people to help me at the time. We're working to help people to develop their soul growth. And that energy comes from the soul as you awaken it. The colours that you pick up often are indication of the healing that person may need. Like the blue is also a very healing colour, it's a calming colour. It works and reflects on the throat centre, the lungs. Green is the heart centre, but then it's also very healing. But sometimes when you're doing healing on someone, when you close your eyes and you're asked to be the instrument for that healing, often you'll be shown a colour. And that can be the colour that's being channeled into that person's physical body. And often when you develop your gifts of seeing auras, the energy around people, you can see the different colours because as you think, you're creating a lot of those colours around you because it comes from the soul and your thought patterns as well. So, but you know, it is so interesting. Have you ever sat and lit a candle and step back and sit and look at the candle, don't look at the flame, but look away from it and see the energy? And you can see colours. Well, that's what you see around people's aura, around the energy field. That's an energy field that we all reflect. Even if you go out and look at trees, you'll see the energy around trees, and gum trees and plants. That's a life force. And when we leave this physical body, our etheric body goes into the spirit world. We leave this shell behind, but we still take our thoughts and feelings. But, you know, healing is so important to be able to even heal yourself. There's a lot of things that doctors shake their heads because they say, you know, we can't do anything more for you, but it's a soul growth and spirit. You can help sometimes to bring that energy through and heal yourself. Sometimes this work attracts people that have got mental disorders, and if they're bipolar or schizophrenic, they should not be sitting in a circle. But there's a lot of people that have been diagnosed with that, but in actual fact, they're not schizophrenic because they've got attachments. And that's what we do rescue on people. But the thing is, when young people start to go through puberty, that's when their psychic gifts are open. And so what happens, they can either see people or they might hear someone talking to them. It could be a grandmother or someone that's passed over. They go and tell their parents. Parents rush them off to the doctor. They send them to a psychiatrist. They put them on drugs. They lose all control of their mind. They are not in control. So then they pick up earthbound souls, mischievous souls that want to take them over and control them. And that's where you've got the problems. There's people in institutions that should never be there. And this is the sad part about it. The other thing too, you have to understand how energy works. People go around, and this is why I've been doing this, what I call the Rainbow Bridge. People go around with all their solar plexus, their chakras open, we call the wheels of energy, the solar plexus, and they draw low mischievous souls. They play games on the base chakras. They want to be psychic and they don't care who they draw through. If they come in the light of God, you communicate with them. If they don't, send them to the light. And this is what they do here. You always work from the heart centre and the higher levels of consciousness. You don't work from the solar plexus down. But they do open naturally. When you're gifted, all those centres will open and they balance. But you also have to learn to be strong. When you're strong in your mind, you don't get the attachment. I've had my husband wandering around me at night.
Touched me on the head last night.
And we talked about this before he passed away, but he, after we had his celebration of his life, all of a sudden photos started falling off the wall, but they didn't go down on there and smash. They went over the chair and finished up near the lounge suite. And then I'd come out in the morning and find photos all over the floor of him or some of the children. But some of these photos were in a photo album in one of the bedrooms. So he's letting me know he's around. And then the other night, I was watching a movie, and of course what happens, I fall asleep in the middle of the movie, wake up, something else is on. And I looked at the clock and I said, oh, it's 22, I better go to bed. And I heard him say, yes, for goodness sake, go to bed. So I know he's around, and he's been around like